want you to give me your imagination. I want you to imagine here's a meadow. See the meadow? In the meadow there's a duck and a fish and an eagle and a squirrel and a rabbit. You see them? Dude, you got trouble. And while they're playing, some kids come by on their way to school and they're laughing and singing and they frighten the animals. And the animals all run back in the bushes and they look out through the bushes and they see the human beings intruding through their meadow, and that really upsets them. They resent the human beings tramping through their meadow. And so as soon as the human beings are out of sight, they come back out in the meadow and they start barking and bitching and barking and bitching. But there's a leader among them. He says, hey, you know, those human beings, they get to go to school and they get to be smart. Why don't we have a school so we can be smart like the human beings are? Somehow this leader just hit the time and the idea right, and everybody says, yeah, let's have a school, let's have a school. They got excited about that. And then somebody said, well, what will our folks think? They said, well, let's go ask them. So they all ran home and asked their folks about it, and their folks got excited about having their school. So they all decided they're going to have a school, but the problem was, what should the curriculum be? Now, they didn't know what to do about that, and then somebody found out that human beings have committees and task forces. So they put together an animal committee to figure out what the curriculum should be, and you know, they didn't do too badly. They may be even better than human beings, because they figured out what you ought to do is, for an animal school, is you ought to have running, and swimming, tree climbing, jumping, and flying. First day out of school, all of the animals were excited, and that rabbit family got up early that morning. That little bear rabbit combed his ears, and he went hopping off to school, and the first class was running. He stretched out and running and said, oh, I love school. I get to go to school and get to do the thing I like to do. I love school. The instructor came over and said, Rabbit, you know, you really have some talent for running. He said, Rabbit, if you'd hold your paw like that, instead of that, you wouldn't get quite as tired. And he said, Rabbit, you have some really good muscles in your rear legs here, and we'll put you in some weight training. We'll build up those muscles, and you'll get more out of every hop. All that really turned the rabbit on. He says, oh, I love school. Get to go to school, get to do the thing I like to do, and now I get to learn to do it better. Just love school. Went on to swimming that morning. He got in and he smelled the chlorine. He said, wait, come on. Rabbits don't like to get wet. I really don't want to be in here. I don't want to take this course. The instructor said, well, you may not like it now, but 5 years from now, you'll know it's a good thing for you. Well, he didn't mind too much. Because for the first 3 weeks, I just studied the history of swimming and what rabbits should know about the dog paddle and the Australian crawl. They might have a test over it someday. He went on to tree climbing, and what they did in tree climbing was they bent over a tree, and they would have him to run at that tree and see how far he could get up, and he got up to average. And they said that was just fine for a rabbit in tree climbing. They gave him a satisfactory on his report card. In jumping, he got along fine. Flying, he had a problem. So they gave him a psychological test. And they discovered that he should be in remedial flying. Now, remedial flying turned out to be a cliff. And what they would have him to do is to run and jump off of that cliff. And they told him if he just worked hard enough at it, he would get it. They Pygmalionized the teacher. Do you know how to Pygmalionize a teacher or anybody? What you do is you tell the teacher that rabbits really can fly, so they won't be biased against their learning this. So this teacher is Pygmalionized. Now they kept telling them to just work hard and jump off, but to keep jumping off, and no success at all. And he'd get depressed. And when he'd get depressed, then they'd get one of these motivational tapes like Zig Ziglar. Anybody can do anything if they just want to. They play that for him, and that made him feel worse because he couldn't get any better. He wasn't doing any better. Well, the squirrel got along all right in running, didn't like swimming either, but in tree climbing, that squirrel was fantastic. Get those branches going, just go off magnificently through the trees. Got along all right in jumping. Flying had a problem, so they gave him a psychological test and put him back in remedial flying with the rabbit. The duck showed early signs of delinquency. The duck could not get stride in running, so they'd have him stay after school to practice his running. And they were very concerned about the wobble of the duck. But this was a very competitive duck. And every time the rabbit would get ahead in running, it would arouse that competition team, and he'd get out his wings and fly ahead. Of course, that upset the rabbit, and the rabbit complained. Then they got into the book of procedure, and they found out that using wings in running is a wrong procedure, wrong method. So they scolded the duck about using the wrong method. He couldn't help it. He just couldn't help it. Every time the rabbit got ahead, he'd still get out his wings and So pretty soon they decided, what are we going to do about this? They have to staff it. So they got the whole staff of the school together to consider the problem of the duck using his wings in running. And they finally figured out they'd have to put a clip on his wings. So they got a special made clip and they put that on the duck. And when they did that, that frustrated it. Then he quacked when he's supposed to be quiet. Then they scolded him for quacking. That frustrated him more. And then he bit another duck. And that's the first sign of delinquency. Then one day in tree climbing, now of course the duck had to climb the tree the same as the squirrel because they said that was the only thing that would be what?
Fair.
Fair, yeah. Fair is equal. So they have to do it, they have to be climbing up here. So here's a poor old duck trying to get up the tree, and here comes a squirrel by him that arouses his competition. He gives a lunge, rips a web out of his feet, and that hurts, snaps the clip off of his wings, and that old duck just flew to the top of the tree, and there's the old duck sitting up there on the top of the tree. Everybody said, look what the duck did. Wrong method, wrong method. They yelled at him to come back, and he just flew away. And that confirmed they had a delinquent duck on their hands. Now the fish. The fish had a lot of problem with running. After the third day of school, the third week of school, the rabbit came to school and he stretched out and running. Oh, it felt good. The instructor came over and said, Rabbit, you're having so much success in running, it's measurable. He said, your speed's improving, you're getting more out of every hop, you're not showing the signs of fatigue. He said, Rabbit, you just have a great future in running. He said, oh, I love school. I get to go to school and do the thing I like to do, and then I get to learn to do it better. Just love school. Went on to swimming that morning. He got in and I heard him say, today we jump in the water. He said, oh, come on, we've talked about this before. Can we discuss it? I've talked it over. My parents didn't learn to swim. My grandparents didn't learn to swim. We built our homes away from the water. He said, I want to drop this course. I said, you can't drop it. It's beyond the drop and add period. He said, I don't care. I just don't. So they said, well, at this point, your choice is either you jump in or you flunk. So he got it up and he jumped in, and when he jumped in, he knew he'd made a mistake. He was drowning. The instructor saw he was drowning, got out his hook and hooked him out. Did you ever see a wet rabbit? Doesn't look like a rabbit at all, kind of like a rat without a tail on it. And all the other animals came around. They barked and chirped and made fun of that rabbit being wet and looking so funny. And the rabbit was more humiliated than he'd ever been before. Just hated being there. Didn't want anything as much as getting out of class that day. Just glad when it was over. When he got out, he still had a good, strong ego. And he said, that's terrible. I've got to get a better definition of myself than that. So when he went to tree climbing, he just really got all his energy together, and he took the biggest, hardest run at that tree he'd ever taken, and he was wet and he slipped off the tree and hurt his leg. Then jumping, he couldn't jump quite as well. By the time he got to flying, that leg was so sore that he tripped right here on the edge and he went rolling down the side. Now he's dirty, more humiliated than ever. He's thinking, I'm not even going back to my class. I'm just going to hop around under bushes all the way home, because I get home, my folks don't understand. He got home, his folks were there. He went in, he said, I don't like school. I just want to be free. I just want to be out in the meadow. And the parents looked over their glasses and they said, if the rabbit's going to get ahead, you got to get a diploma. He said, I don't want a diploma. They said, you're going to get a diploma whether you want a diploma or not. Well, they argued about it, made him go to bed. He didn't sleep very much that night, didn't want to get up the next morning, didn't comb his ears. And then he made the mistake of telling his folks, he said, I'm not going to school. And they looked him right back and they said, either you go to school or we're going to bite you, which is what rabbits say. And so he went off kind of slow hops, thinking about would he go to the meadow, would he go to school. Then he remembered, they said, if ever there's a day when you have a problem, just remember the counselor's door is always open. And he thought if ever there was a day when he needed a counselor, it was today. So he went on to school, and sure enough, the door was open, hopped up in the chair, looked the counselor in the eye and said, I don't like school. And the counselor said, tell me about it. And he did. He said that he really liked running. He just got along fine in running, but he had a terrible time in swimming. He was almost drowned swimming, hurt his leg in tree climbing. Then he tripped on the cliff and rolled down the side, and it was so humiliated, and he was all dirty, and went home and thought his folks would understand. They said, you got to get a diploma. He said, I don't want to get a diploma. Said, I just want to be free. I just want to be out in the meadow. The counselor says, Rabbit, I hear you. I hear you, Rabbit. I hear you saying you don't like school because you don't like swimming. I've been looking in your folder, and I see you're doing very well in running. Rabbit, I don't know why you need to work on running. You're doing just fine in running. What you need to work on is swimming. Rabbit, I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll arrange it that you don't have to go to running anymore, and you can use that time for swimming. And you can have 2 periods of swimming. When the rabbit heard that, he just threw up. And if you ever say to the rabbit, how you doing, you know what the rabbit says? The rabbit says, I'm burnt out, because you always are burnt out. You burn out when you aren't using your talent. That's when you burn out. You never burn out when you're using your talent. When you're really using your talent. When you're not using your talent, when you burn out. The other thing he said, I'm a poor swimmer. I can't swim. You get that negative concept, and when you ask people to do over and over what they can't do, they get that negative concept, and it spreads to other things that they do. You say, well, you talk to leaders about animals. Animals are even more different than, or less, people are more different than animals are. I mean, even among us, we're more different because we're more complex. That's one thing. And then I think this does have some impact in terms of other things we do, but how many of you have children in school? Let me ask that question. Okay. Let me just have you suppose that across America today, here there's some grades that come home. There's an A, and then there's another A, and then there's a middle one like a C, and then there's a low one like a D or an F. Now, if these grades came home across America, which of these grades would most parents deem worthy of considerable conversation? Yeah, we've done a Gallup poll about this. 84% of the people start here with their kids. We've got work to do. We've got a lot of work to do. Let's say I'm a developmental parent. I say, hey kid, you had a really good semester. You found 2 things you could do and had a chance to show you could do them well. I want to congratulate you. That's wonderful. You're going to have a lot of times when you have 3, 4, 5 months like that, you won't find 2 things you can do and have a chance to show you can do them well. That's great. I congratulate you for that. Furthermore, kid, I congratulate you for this one down here. Because apparently you had a course that wasn't worth much, and you didn't spend too much time on it. I congratulate you for that. You know, you say, oh, those little devils will stop working if you do that. You can't do that. Then I got to say, hey, let's let a little reality come in. How many of you, when you were young, knew when you had a dumb course? Did you know that, when you had a dumb course? That's one where you got worse instead of better. That's a dumb course. And how many of you know what a dumb instructor is? That's where it's a pretty good course, but you get worse because just of the way they make you feel about it, what you can do. That's a dumb course. Now, how many of you would know then what a double dumb is? That's when you get them at the same time, a dumb course and a dumb instructor. That's a double dumb. Now, you probably know what that is, but you may not know what a triple dumb is. Do you know what a triple dumb is? That's when you have a dumb course, a dumb instructor, and you get an A in it. That is what we call really dumb. Because you haven't learned that that which is not worth doing is not worth doing well. And you know, I'm not just kidding about this, because we've had a lot of questions that we've asked about this. And the people who become leaders started sorting out what was worth doing and what was not worth doing pretty early in life, many times in school. That they'd get some high grades and some low grades. If one was really fit and they had an excited instructor, they got an A. If it wasn't so good, they started out and they said, I'm just going to get by. So there's a difference. And that, I can show you, is statistically significant. So we're not just talking about something funny. It's the people who sort. Leaders sort out what's worth doing and what's not worth doing. And then that's with your customers. You get good customers, you figure out who they are. You spend your most of your time with your people who have the talent, and when you spend time with a person, you talk about what they do best, not what they do worst. This can change the world. This can change the world.